right, there we go. I love it. Brooke Vale is on, the Vales. And Brian, great to see those guys. Oh, Douglas Dickler's here. Gosh, so many awesome people.
Brooke Vale. Jason Guerrero. John.
Hey, the Kansas City crew is coming on in the house. I'm telling you what, Pete, you don't want to leave your doors unlocked after you introduce yourself to this crew. Keep your valuables out of sight in the office, you know. It's a smuggler's row. All right, look at that.
Is it in alphabetical order? How is it?
No, it's just how they come on.
Philip and Jolene.
Yeah. Oh, Mary Watson's on.
Oh, good, Mary.
Yeah. Rod Fleming and Kat. I love it. Rubenstein's.
Okay, Kat.
Oh, the Curleys, of course. Nothing but trouble from them. Jennifer Baldino, great to see you. Our winemaking team is on. That's a good sign. Jason Price. Hey everybody, we'll get started in earnest here in just a second, but I thought for the start of every one of these, since I've been trapped at home with the most pleasant company in the world, I just wanted to introduce everybody to Shelly Smith Slone, my beautiful wife. Since she just had her hair highlighted for the first time in 4 months, she's showing off her blonde locks today. I'm Elton Slone, if anybody doesn't know me, which I always figure there are some, because there's no way we could have this many people on a webinar that know me and will come back. And then to the left of your screen, up top, that is our estate manager, Christian Mullen, who is one of the best in the business. He's going to be fielding your questions. So if you have a question to go live, just hit Q&A. And then Christian will stop us at different points and say, hey, Elton, hey, Pete, Brian Meyer has a question. And then below us, but above us in terms of his stature in the Napa Valley community, is Pete Richmond, the owner and founder of Silverado Farming Company. And I'm working off some of my debt to Pete right here on the screen. I'm charging Pete to come on and shill his company for you. But Pete's one of the best farmers in all of the Napa Valley. Let me see, how many people do we have? 39
right now.
Okay.
I wonder if the McCulloughs are going to show up too.
Yeah, I think we're going to have we have about 100 participants and about 200 coming on. So I'll give it one more minute. I hope everybody's having a glass of rosé because it is Friday.
Ooh, I need my glass.
Yeah, that's first mistake. First mistake. Cheers, you guys.
Elton, here's my glass.
Oh yeah, that's the jug of rosé. That was hot. That was fought after in a hard part. The rosé's it's right here. Kitty cat needs some milk.
I do. You gonna give me some room here?
Well, but baby, we're running to the end of our time together in this webinar. Say hi to the crowd, and then we'll get right into it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your support coming on today. Love you all.
Well, everyone, I'd just like to say first to all of my Craigers, and I see a lot of people that have done all of the webinars that are on board today, which is just so awesome. I absolutely love it, and it's so much appreciated from our standpoint as a little company. I can't believe it, but the last couple of months, we've done more business than we did this time last year, and we had a very good year last year. So we've gone from being crushed with 60% of our wine going to restaurants and just losing that revenue stream overnight, but you all have come on and really helped us out as a company. We have all of our people on board, and this series has been an eye-opener for me and learning so much from our guests. And Pete is, I think, of all things we do at Robert Craig, one of the biggest changes that we made. You know, when Bob retired in 2012, one of the greatest guys in all the business, he and Lynn Craig may be watching from home in Arizona. I hope she's not hit by the fires in Tucson today. But of all the things that we've done as a company, I think starting in 2012, we started to acquire more vineyard site because I could see the way of the valley is to get that really high quality fruit, the price would fluctuate so much that it was impossible, if we're not farming itself, to farm to the absolute highest standard in the Napa Valley. And the growers always want to give you, more tons per acre than you want. And now we have control over our own destiny. So since 2012, when we were 20% estate grown, now we are 90% estate grown in terms of what we produce. And Walsh Vineyard Management did the planting on the Candlestick Vineyard that we bought from Duckhorn back in 2015. And it's really an amazing place, and it's changed. And Pete, before I start you, I'm going to just flip to the vineyard really quickly here. This will give you a shot of Candlestick. And if you look to kind of the middle left of your screen, just over that ridge is where our winery is located. That's where Black Sears Vineyard, Larry Turley's place, goes Black Sears, Larry Turley's place, and then Robert Craig all in a row on the summit cap. But you can see just how remote this vineyard is and how wild it is. So we are gonna talk to Pete about the challenges of farming this, what we're doing as a company. But one of the things, one of the really, really bright guys at Walsh that wanted to manage for ultra quality Toll Merit departed there to go back and work for his family business. And I decided at that time, I wanted to find somebody that was even going to take it further and farther in terms of the quality in the management. And Pete Richmond happens to have the reputation. You've been farming Black Sears, our next door neighbor, and the vineyard always looks gorgeous up there, as well as I think Donna's on Howell Mountain as well. You guys have them, but let me introduce Pete Richmond. And how long have you had your company, Pete?
So I always like to say we started on April Fool's Day 2001 is our official start date.
Right on. And what made you want to start a farming company? What did you see a need in the Napa Valley for the next level of farming?
Yeah, I was really fortunate when I got out of college in the mid 80s. I went to work for a family and had a vineyard in Santa Maria called Mendocino Vineyards, and really learned a little bit more about high-end farming. Came to Napa in the early 90s, went to work for Kendall Jackson and worked on a lot of their high-end properties, more out of dumb luck than anything else. And always knew I wanted to work for myself, but really from the standpoint of what could we do as a company that provided a very high level of service. 90% of our business is with estate wineries, not growers, and really focused on the end product being high-end wine. So very much trying to run it not as, I hate to say this, but not as a traditional farmer, but as a business and as somebody who's producing luxury goods.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, I have to tell the crowd there that, for my bill last month for shoot positioning and suckering, I think was $80,000 for the two Howell Mountain vineyards. So Pete ain't cheap, but what you do is the very best. And I think it's pretty cool that Nick, who is helping to manage that vineyard, actually went to school with Jason Price, our winemaker. So those guys already have a connection. It's worked out. And I mean, for me, Candlestick was such a major investment at the time. Duckhorn needed the capital to buy Three Palms Vineyard, which was a huge portion. That was 90 acres and a giant portion of what they did. And that little piece of Candlestick, which is significant at almost 26 acres under vine on a 100-acre piece of real estate, for them was just a pain in the ass to come up and farm. And even though they were getting, great scores on the wines they produced from there, I think we're going to take it, to another level. And so that's what we're doing. I mean, so for us, the reason we're doing this tasting is it's really a showcase of, now that we're blending Candlestick fruit in with our estate Howell Mountain. The fruit's a little more explosive from Candlestick. Our wine, where the winery is, that winery estate vineyard, is a little more restrained. And one of the things that the stick has enabled us to do with that acreage and replanting a significant portion, about half of the vineyard that was planted on sort of, diseased vines. I think they had every single kind of leaf roll. They had like leaf roll 1, 2, 3, and 4 there. But it has enabled us to, plant on the correct clean rootstock at the right, sun exposure. And then you guys coming in, when you look at the stick, Pete, what do you see as the possibility for the vineyard? Do you think it can be one of the great vineyards in the Napa Valley?
Well, I think that you start breaking down appellations. And we were just having this conversation today about Oakville and Rutherford. And Oakville and Rutherford, while they're considered great appellations in the Napa Valley, most of the soils there are not great. They're suitable for growing vegetables, all right? Get into the mountains and you start looking at the mountains, and Howell Mountain and Diamond Mountain probably being the two premier mountain regions in Napa. Howell Mountain has typically very low pH soils, which then slows down vine growth. We really limit yields because of the amount of the shortness of the days up there. We're also probably one of the highest elevations in the valley at, I think we're at 2,600 feet. And so from the standpoint of, there's a little bit of more farming on the edge of things. It's not traditional farming. And so you really have to be on your game as far as watching what's going on. And if yields traditionally for Cabernet in the Napa Valley have been 3 to 4 acres since the 1960s. The reality is, like Candlestick, we're probably year in, year out, on a 5-year average, we're probably going to be 2.5 tons a year. And that's tightening the spacing up. It means farming at a higher level. It means really working with the winemaking team. We like to have a lot of input from winemaking. So anytime we're making decisions out there in that vineyard, we've got Jason involved. So he understands what we're doing and we understand what he's trying to do with the wine.
Well, I think, you know, it's much different for those of you out there to farm a Napa Valley floor vineyard, Pete. You're probably, if your company's doing that, it's probably, you know, somewhere between $8,000 and $11,000 an acre. Is that right? In our place?
Yeah, typically, you know, so let's just talk about development costs. You know, if you ask me to develop a vineyard on the valley floor, the 3-year development costs on that may be $40,000, maybe $50,000. Once you ask me to get up in the mountains where we see all those rocks, I'm going to spend $40,000 to $50,000 just on rock removal, dirt work, getting the soil in shape to plant. By the time that 3 years is up, I'm probably going to spend $100,000 to $125,000 in just infrastructure, making sure the vines have gotten up into place, and dealing with the environment that exists around them. So just the development costs are 3 times what they would be on the valley floor. Farming costs, you generally anticipate they're going to be double what they're on the valley floor, again, with probably 30% less fruit.
Yeah, it's really an amazing equation. It's very tough to do. So, you know, when people tell me, hey, Elton, you know, that Howell Mountain's kind of getting up there in price, I'm like, don't worry about it. It is not getting up there in price. At $110, it's hard to make even a living on our Howell Mountain Cabernet. So anything that says mountain on it from the Napa Valley, I was just going to show these guys real quick with a screen share what it looked like when we ripped the Candlestick Vineyard. Then I'll come back to, but here's a shot of this vineyard. Had already been ripped twice. It had been planted before Duckhorn bought it, then Duckhorn bought it and replanted in '97. And then this is, look at that rock garden, man. They had a rock picker out there every day, just thousands of dollars to get that big section of the vineyard replanted. So when you look at the vineyard, when you look at this vineyard, the section that was replanted is the one that's farthest away from you in the photograph. It's the one that's from the upper left all the way down on the terraces. And so it's just an astounding vineyard and was tremendously expensive to do. But let's move in. We're all getting thirsty. I'm getting very thirsty. I've got my time clicking to what I like to call our intentional Zinfandel, rosé, Grenache rosé. And you can see this is Alban clone. One of the things that I left in, because Stephen and Jason wanted it, was this awesome block of Grenache, from which we use it to produce the Côte de Craig. It goes in with the Alban clone Syrah, and just a beautiful block of vineyard there. So the first wine we're going to do is, and I think Christian, we're completely sold out of this, right?
We are, unfortunately.
Well, I didn't get enough. I didn't get enough for myself. I didn't even pick up my own damn case. So, but this is an early pressing. It's a non-Saignée wine, which means, you know, we used to make a rosé from drain down of Black Sears Vineyard Zinfandel, and it's called Saignée, which is Saignée method, which is Saignee with a little accent aigu over the first E, and you basically are bleeding off light colored juice to intensify the wine that you're making. And everybody would say, God, Elton, this rosé is so great. And I thought, is it? You know, because if you've had Domaine Tempier or a great rosé from south of France or Bandol or from Cassis, you know that rosé should be, as Jamie always points out, intentional rosé, which means you're making it in a style where you're growing the grapes and intending to make rosé from it. So we do an early harvest. You're going to love that this year, Pete. You're going to pick that. Your guys are going to pick that block like 4 times, that one little set of Grenache. But it is, so we pick this from 20 to 22 degrees bricks usually before it colors up. And then it's a very gentle pressing, straight off the skins, into tank, ferment. And what you get is this beautiful color. So this isn't like a dark red rosé. I mean, I see people making rosé of Cabernet. I admit guilty in 2006 of doing that, but I had a hard time sleeping at night and having people pay money for it. Although we did drink a lot of that around the company counter. But this is real deal. And as Pete mentioned, the soils on Howell are very low pH, which means the wines have a corresponding higher acidity. So this has this brightness, this freshness. And I think this is the best domestic rosé that I have ever tried. You know, to me, it ain't quite Domaine Tempier. That wine has a little more depth to me, but there is nothing out there in America. I don't know, Pete, if you've tried somebody's rosé that is comparable to this, but I've tried a ton and I just love this wine.
We'll say the first key. The first key on all this is using the right grapes, and not to use Cabernet to make rosé is the right decision. You know, the other reason why you're able to retain such great acidity on this is because of elevation, and you get those cool nights. And so through all the grape wines, you see that beautiful acidity coming through, and that just makes them so much more approachable than what you may find on the Valley Floor locations.
Yeah, and up on Hell Mountain, I'll show a bunch here, which I didn't unfortunately pick an optimal. I didn't choose an optimal. Let me see here. There we go. I didn't choose an optimal bunch, but you can see here, Pete. So what's going on here? This is when flower is turning into set, right?
Right. Yeah. And so again, if this is a relatively recent shot, again, you come down to the valley floor and we have berries that are the size of peas right now. So it just shows you the difference between these mountain elevations and the valley floor and what they can do, and the great expression that comes out of the site. And the site dictates so much of the flavor profile, much more than manipulation, winemaker or vineyard manipulation does. It's really about the spot.
I totally agree. And you can see that as these flowers, as fruit is occurring, as these little, bumps start coming out, that the clusters are very loose, which is somewhat of a 2019 vintage, but it's really common in the mountains where you get looser clusters. So the nice thing is you don't have mold or mildew, but on the downside, you just don't get a lot of fruit from the vineyards, which, if people are wondering out there, if you have a very typical in Napa Valley, like a little higher density planting, like 1,800 vines an acre, it is not uncommon to get over 5 tons an acre. And as Pete was saying, on Howell Mountain, we're getting 2.5 tons an acre is a really good yield for us. And frankly, at our winery property, I mean, we've had like 10 years where, because 2015 was so short, I mean, I think we averaged 1.8 tons an acre on that place. So very different wine. I hope everybody out there, do we have any questions at this point?
Actually, yes. We well, a comment and a question. The first question came from Victor on. He said, "Thank you, Elton, so much for making the 18 Howell Mountain Cuvée so affordable." Tailing on that, if you wouldn't mind, speak to the 18 Cuvée a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
I have a bottle right here that Shelly and I are going to crush immediately after this thing is over. But it's one of those things where I decided, hey, it's COVID. There was a huge oversupply of fruit in 2018. And the good news is it is an absolutely killer vintage. I mean, 18, the wines are just great. Big time, high anthocyanin, big color counts, great acidity. And I thought, you know what? We have all these young vines on the mountain. I'm going to bottle up something that we can release about a year earlier so we don't have to pay the storage cost. And we can sell a lot of it direct to our customers and have a couple distributors take one huge whack of it and give us some operating capital here in the middle of the summertime, which for us is difficult because we pay 500 grand for bottling and then 300,000 for barrels in the summer in between our club releases. So it's really always super cash tight for us. A lot of distributors are slowed down, although we do get tourists in the valley. So I said, how about we just make the best $50 bottle of wine in the universe, where it's at a price where we barely make money on it, because as you can see, Pete has a Ferrari out front, a boat in the back, and he's usually wearing an ascot with his farming prices. But it is my sort of gift to our customers to produce a wine that is truly great. It's going to age for 20 years in the cellar. You can put it down for 2 decades, but it has enough Merlot and enough softness. You unfortunately don't have this one, Pete. You have to come by the office and pick up a couple cases. We'll give you your grower discount. But it's predominantly from Candlestick, and it's essentially a $100 bottle of wine in a $50 package. So we released it yesterday to our wine club, and I think we sold, we sold 150 cases in a few hours. I mean, it really went out the door quickly. So we're not going to have much of it. So that's my answer to that question. Anything else?
Not at this point. Actually,
Everybody's wondering who does Pete's hair.
sorry, we did have Amy James wants to know how the 18 cuvee compares to the 13.
Oh, well, the 13 cuvee is very nice, but that was like leftover fruit from Lalande Vineyard on the valley floor. So the 18 cuvee is a bottle of wine that is really like light years beyond that wine in terms of quality. I mean, the cuvee has always been good. The Mount George cuvee is a very nice wine, but this is from one of the greatest vineyards anywhere on the Napa Valley, which means one of the greatest in the planet Earth. And it's really one of those things where don't sleep on it because it's going fast. But thanks for that question. Boy, I couldn't have asked for a better question than that. We just released it yesterday. So Pete, before we go into the next wine, any comments on the rosé? Do you like it?
No, I just love the fact that it's real rosé. And what I mean by that is, if you ask around the office when people tell me they're making rosé, my first question is, so you're ruining perfectly good Napa Valley Cabernet and turning it into rosé, which is a little bit sacrilegious to me. So just wonderful to see that somebody's made the commitment to use the right grapes, the right varietals to make this wine.
Well, thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoy this one. I love, it just transports me to the south of France. And Shelley and I were supposed to go, there right. I think I got COVID in early March, right when it came out. I had the eye infection and the cough and the fever and everything. And so I'm hoping I'm bulletproof now, but we didn't get our chance to go to France and drink a bunch of the real deal right there. So it's great to have this in release. I took a case home right away, and I'm on my last couple bottles, and I came into the office and I was going to pick up a case, Kristen, and everything in the cold room says spoken for, spoken for, spoken for. So, I guess Kristen, you're good at your job, but and you and Jamie, but it's awfully annoying sometimes in KC. So Pete, can you kind of put your finger on, like, I'm talking about the expense, but what makes farming in the mountains? You mentioned the rocks. What else would make farming in these mountain vineyards more difficult and more expensive for you?
Well, you hit on something when you mentioned picking this Grenache 4 times, and we look at when we look at any of these mountain vineyards, that Candlestick or other stuff that we farm, it's really dissecting these vineyard blocks that we talk about. Candlestick being 26 acres. Within that, there's 15 different vineyard blocks. We then break those down from those 15 to how many fermentation lots are we going to have out of that, and really managing those individuals because the soils change so dramatically. throughout the properties. And so you really have to micromanage this stuff, which means you have to have somebody watching it all the time. We have vineyard, I'm thinking of a vineyard we have in Rutherford that's 40 acres. Well, it's the same soil all the way across the vineyard, so it's very easy to farm. You get into the hillsides and you really have to be paying attention, or you're gonna, and the margin of error is very short. What I mean by that is, if you miss an irrigation by 3 days, it's gonna potentially really set you back. So it's really about having eyeballs out there watching things. And when I say you're working without a net, there's a certain amount of, it's high risk, high reward farming. And again, you're trying to produce a luxury good. And if you're selling wine, High Mountain wine for $110 a bottle, you're well below what the rest of the world is doing from the standpoint of what it costs to produce that wine. So it's really a testament to the site as far as what the wines are. And we really want the wines to reflect a place, and that's what we're trying to do with everything we do.
Well, I think, when you look at, next we're going to move over to a wine that I wanted to do as my homage to the vineyard that we've always called the Stick. It is Candlestick, our name for that, our nickname for that in the office is the Stick. So when we're at the Hell Mountain Winery property, I say, I'm headed over to the Stick. So I wanted to make a wine that was an homage to that property, hence the Stick. And on the back label, it says, in a world of carrots and sticks, the Stick represents the discipline. Because the one thing we always have, that Candlestick has even more so than the Hell Mountain Estate, is this massive tannin. And for those of you that don't tannin is what helps structure the wine. But if you get too much tannin, if the tannin outpaces the color component in the wine, what happens is you're making like Diamond Creek Cabernet from the mid 80s, where sometimes the fruit all dries out in the wine and you're left with that massive tannin and it just tastes like tannin water. I've had some of those wines. I think they're making the best wines they've ever made right now. I know the Bronsteins are probably rolling over somewhere, but they sold it. But at any rate, my goal, is to work with you, Pete, as a farmer, to get this, to keep the tannins in check in the field so we don't have to do anything in the winery. But one of the tools we have in the winery is Merlot. We have fantastic Merlot that grows up there. It's not too hot for it because it's at elevation. And we can blend it with Merlot and Malbec, which are very high color, lower tannin varieties. And then we blend it with this huge tannic Cabernet, and the wine just sings. So I think this is about 60 to 65% Cabernet, then a big shot of Merlot, and a little bit of Malbec, like 5% of Malbec. So we're going to get into the Bordeaux portion of the program now, and we're going to the Stick. The 16 is the inaugural release. And this wine is $150, or else we would go broke making it. But what a wine it is. And I hope for those of you who have not tried this, it's really young. I think, Kristen, you can attest that when we first tried this wine back in the day, oh my goodness, you can see the color, that it's just a massive glass of wine that people always say, well, how long do you have to wait to drink this? So the 16 is still a baby. The 17 will be out soon, but we're pretty much sold. I think we're almost sold out of the 16. And I think personally 16 is one of the best vintages in the mountains of the Napa Valley since 74. I mean, what are some of your favorite vintages, Pete?
Well, you look at 2007, 2010, the really great vintages. Going back before that, probably 97. And actually, if you drink 98s right now, they're probably, at least the ones we've gone through recently, they're probably showing better than the 97s. We were really worried about 98 being a cold vintage, and those wines have really held up beautifully as compared to 97. You talked about tannins. One of the things we work with Jason on is how we manage tannins in the vineyard. And part of the way we go about doing that is how do we irrigate the vineyard, and timing of irrigation helps us manage tannins. And that's part of that. What we want is that continuous feedback loop from winemaking to vineyard, so that we have a clear understanding. If you have tannin issues in a block, meaning they're too big, we can work to bring those back down by some of our irrigation practices in the vineyard. So you're not just dealing with it on the winery side.
Exactly. And that means a lot of hands-on. It means a lot of eyes-on. It means Carlos Mendez is in touch with your guys all the time. Carlos is employee number 1 at Robert Craig and worked with Bob. I mean, the beauty of Bob and Lynn Craig are they're the finest, 2 of the greatest people. I don't know if you ever got a chance to meet Bob or Lynn, Pete, at anything, but Bob was just one of the greatest guys in the wine business, and I miss him every day. And it's so great to still talk to Lynn and be in touch. But you know, I have to say, Bob was a lousy marketer of his own wine, and when things went crazy, he never took the price up. And so it is a great opportunity, I think, for all the Craig customers who have kind of sought us out in as this making world-class wine for this price. And let me tell you, at 150, this baby is still a great buy. I think we took some major, I mean, it's definitely the time for you guys to buy the remainder of the 16 stick. If there's any around, Christian, because we made it, we wanted everybody to be able to participate in this and be able to pull something, you know, drink something without freaking out that it was going to be, it needed to be cellared for another, you know, 20 years. So this wine will really, I think, start showing nice about 7 years after vintage date. So this 16 in 2023 is really going to start showing its class and its flow and that gorgeous bottle perfume. This wine is blowing my mind right now. Very different than the estate, is more restrained, more linear. You know, this wine is massive.
Hey, Elton, would you mind talking about how the 19 stick indexed?
Well, I mean, and the 16 and 17 and 18 stick, they were all like, we use a service for assay service, Enologics, that you basically, as a winery, if you're in France or you're in California, you either use Wine X-ray or Enologics, and I'm used to Enologics, where you look at the complex anthocyanin in the wine versus the tannin content, and you want this balance where you have enough, this very high level of complex anthocyanin, which means the molecules in the wine, the color molecules, have bonded with the tannin molecule in the wine, and it makes a very stable molecule that is much less susceptible to oxygen decay in the wine. And so the beauty of it is, as Bob Craig always said, you know, wines are like people. If you're ugly when you're young, you'll be really out of luck when you're older. And I think that's so true with wine. The beauty of a large complex anthocyanin count is you get these tannins. Even though these wines have a tremendous amount of tannin, they're very supple, very round. And so the wine, I mean, this is massively more tannin than the average Valley Floor wine, and which is why we don't, you know, we do 18 months in oak instead of 24 months, because you start picking up those hard barrel tannins that make the wine, to me, unappealing. You want the tannin structure to come from the skins and the seeds that are ripe on the grapes. And that way you get these round tannins. And that's all, as Pete says, it's all done by the tools in the vineyard, getting the right yield, getting the right irrigation, because you can't really chase it in the winery. You know, a lot of people will go and reverse osmose some of the alcohol out of the wine. They'll try and get it really, really soft, and then, you know, hit it with reverse osmosis, and then you end up having to acidulate the wine after that. And man, that's Franken wine. I'm just too much of a purist to ever do that. So with us, the reason Pete is here is because his crew, we talk about this and say, man, we're just not getting the color counts we need out of this block. And sometimes people can stress the vine so much that it works in the opposite direction. You get very small berries, you get super thick skins that are really tannic, and the wine's two-dimensional. So I think, Pete, we've spoken about this, is, you know, when the vines are going through veraison, you really give them a drink a little bit and let them relax, you know, so that the vine has the energy. And I think we're gonna, you know, we're converting a lot of the vineyard to cane prune as well, instead of traditional cordon prune, which is a Y out like that. You're giving each vine the ability, its own haircut, right, to produce, you know, what that vine. You have some vines that are weaker and stronger right next to each other, depending on what the soil type is. So I mean, what would you say between cane pruning and cordon pruning on mountain vineyards, Pete?
You know, the vast majority of our high-end vineyards that we farm are cane pruned. Cane pruning actually is much more of a skill to prune. And so we have selected breweries that only do cane pruning because it's more involved and it has to be a more thoughtful process. But it does tend to spread the fruit out across the vine a little bit better versus having a congestion, and tends to give you better light penetration on the fruit, which is really important for knocking out some of those green flavors and helping with the tannin.
That's right. And so, you know, if you have a cordon prune, you know, vineyard that's 1,200 or 1,800, you know, vines per acre, depending on what you're doing in terms of your row spacing. With cordon pruning, it's basically you give every vine that gets the same bowl haircut. And with cane pruning, every vine has to get its own haircut depending on how it's positioned. Now, I have tried my hand at cane pruning with Carlos Mendez present, and he always says the same thing. He comes racing down the row going, no, 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 no. So I can tell you that it's quite the skill. I would love to hear some comments from people out there on if they've never tried the stick. Oh, Andy Nichols is on. If they've never tried the stick, what you think of it. I think this wine to me is stunning.
He did say he picks up hints of mint and rose petal and wanted to know what it was attributed to.
It's just the property. You know, there's no doubt that Howell Mountain has a little bit, it reminds me of Spring Mountain in some ways, that there in all the mountains in Napa Valley, there is a slight vegetative nature that runs through Bordeaux varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon in particular. And the key is to not have it be that unpleasant pyrazine where it's like stinky bell pepper or stewed asparagus or something, but that the fruit will have some of this sweet herb, like Howell Mountain is traditionally described as thorny underbrush. It has like a thorny underbrush. And if you ever drive up Howell Mountain with your windows down in the summertime, it is amazing that you smell those wildflowers all over the roads. You can smell the sort of sage and the conifer forest, and that as it warms up, it is incredible how much the wines resemble that smell, that scent you get up. It is a very different perfume than driving up Spring Mountain or Mount Veeder, and it's so present in the wines. So I think Pete might agree with me. I mean, what do you think, Pete? I think personally it's the place.
All about the place. And, you know, we farm Black Sears, which is lower elevation than yours. And even though geographically they're a mile apart, they're worlds apart as far as soils and style of wines go. The stick being essentially a more elegant wine, or more refined, versus Black Sears being sort of it being a little bit more of a hammer. And so just, you can see the elements of the wines. They're really nice.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I am one to preserve the nuance in wines. There's no getting around the fact that these are some massive bottles of wine, but you know, the reward for these is going to be, I think, a little bit down the road, in particular in this wine. Even though it's heavier than the Syrah Grenache that we're about ready to have, I wanted to show the stick because that Syrah Grenache, the Côte de Craig, is so outside the norm of what we do, but it is an incredible bottle of wine. So, Pete, what do you think of this wine? Are you enjoying the stick?
Yeah, no, I love the stick. And it's very representative of, if you put it in the tasting of Howell Mountain wines, of seeing similarities in the flavor profile, which is always nice. And again, it represents place.
So in terms of your favorite wines of the Napa Valley, what are some of the wines you drink that you really seek out and enjoy?
Well, I always like to say, you know, my favorite wines are the ones I get for free. So that's always my starting point. You know, it's interesting. If we farm a lot of stuff,
never be one of your favorites.
No, we farm a lot of stuff that would be considered on the high end, and those wines are really nice, but they're event wines. And so they're a Christmas dinner wine. They're not something you're going to open every night. So when you start looking at just a red wine that I can drink 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week, I'm probably going to, milk a CJ. Really nice wine, sort of what we would, if we had a house wine, that's a really nice house wine for us. Very approachable. It's Philippe's second label. Semi-affordable. If any of Philippe's wines are semi-affordable, but just a really nice wine. Gosh, what else? Some of the stuff that Keith Emerson at Vineyard 29 is doing, who obviously has done some work with Robert Craig. I think Keith is doing, yeah, a lot of work. I think Keith is doing some really nice stuff that is, as I get older, I hate to say, it's tough to drink 14.5% alcohol. And so it's much nicer to find something that's a little more approachable. I have this same problem that maybe 1 or 2 of the guests have, which is I open a bottle, I'm going to drink it. And I still need to get up and go to work the next morning. So that there's that component as well.
Pete, I know there was a reason you always wear sunglasses around the office, but
Not kidding.
yeah, I am a lover of old. All of these wines have the same alcohol on them, 14.8. Because I don't want to change the label every year, but they're all way lower than that. The Chardonnay, I think in 2015 was like 12.9. It wasn't even 13%. So these wines are all harvested at lower brix level, and I like the balance and the acid that you get with the wine. And the beauty is, if anybody has any leftover, you just put the cork in it, put it in the fridge overnight. It'll do 2-3 days in a half bottle format without needing any sort of Coravin, any pumping out anything. These wines are knit together. They're meant to go for the long haul, which is one way you can tell that a wine will do that. So I know you guys with the next wine, one of our projects is, because we're coming up to the project of my folly, the Côte de Craig, which for those of you know, there's the Côte de Rhône, which is, this is not the Côte du Rhône, this is the Côte de Craig. It's DE is correct. There was a panic in the office that we got the label wrong, but I was a French talker from way back, and this means literally the steep hill of the Craig. I wanted to tear this section of the vineyard out, which we'll go to the Vineyard Map again now real quick. I keep forgetting I have all these wonderful visual displays that I'm not using. So this is a Syrah. This is a Syrah that has Grenache in it as well. And if you look at this photograph taken from kind of the top of the vineyard, looking down, you can see an intersection right in the middle. And these grapes are grown just to the left of that intersection where the tree line starts in the direct middle of the photograph. So I keep wanting to point to it. I wish I could use some sort of laser pointer to have you show that. But when I get really good at Zoom one of these days, I'll do it. But the Syrah and Grenache are tough to find and are tough to farm. And I don't know if any of you guys have had John Albin's wines, but he makes some of the finest Syrah in the United States from the Central Coast. And these were clippings taken from his vineyard, which are probably why it's diseased, the Syrah portion. But right now, we are trying to bring, so again, there's another shot of that intersection. So you can see where that hill comes down there into the row, where they all kind of meet in that white chalky soil, that volcanic tufa there. That's the Grenache. That is that tongue coming down just on the other side of the terraces. And then the Syrah is directly across the road from that. Again, that's the soil on the stick, the soil on the estate. So right at the very end on the far right of this picture is a shot of the Grenache. But, I think right now we're trimming some of those Syrah vines, cutting a lot of wood out, trimming them back to close to the scion in some cases in order to get rid of some eutypa and some disease in there. I don't know how up on that you are, Pete, but
Yeah, and, you know, in older vineyards in Napa, U-type is a pathogen that's carried by the rains. And if you prune early, you tend to have a tendency to, when it rains, to get the pathogen in the vines, and it causes the vines to decline. So one of the practices that we're implementing is delayed pruning. So we prune later in the season than we may have 15 years ago. And that's one of the ways we manage the vineyard and try to, when we see vineyards with large amounts of U-type.
Plus, when you have those older vines, you also have to make bigger cuts, right? Which makes the vine more susceptible to any sort of potential pathogen.
Yeah, and just a general comment on Syrah, you know, it's a really fun variety to grow because there's a lot of things we can do within the vineyard to dramatically enhance wine quality. And part of that becomes thinning it, hopefully not when you're around, because when we thin those things, we typically drop half the crop on the ground because it's not going to color as well. And Syrah is just a variety that really needs to be thinned hard to get wine quality out of it.
Wow, that is difficult to hear. You know, I need to go back. I need to go back to Walsh where they just let it all grow out there, and I get my Syrah quota. Well, I mean, Syrah, I mean, I'm a person that loves great Côte Rôtie from the Northern Rhone Valley, which is Syrah based. So if you ever have a chance to have, you know, Cornas, Côte Rôtie, Saint Joseph, those are all the Syrah based wines on what they call the roasted slope. And the Syrah has this incredible sort of grilled bacon fat, this leather, this exotic dark flower character. So I'm going to pour some in my glass now. Shelley, let's see if my wife needs a little Syrah at this point. But this is Syrah blended with Grenache, and the Grenache gives it this great perfume. And the Grenache grown on a Howell Mountain, I can tell you, is not for the faint of heart anyway. You know, you think of Grenache in Baccarat and in Chateauneuf de Pape, Gigondas, but I have to make sure that Shelley is well lubricated for the Friday night dinner that we're going to have. So no matter what I cook, she enjoys it.
You're probably one of the few growers of Grenache and Syrah in Howell Mountain, aren't you?
We are, you know, I would never mess around with Syrah. When I started it at Robert Craig Winery, I still have bad dreams about, we were buying from Tinsley Vineyard, which is a famous vineyard in the Central Coast. And we bought Syrah and would truck it up, you know, 10 hours up to Howell Mountain and produce. I'm like, and we never could sell it. I'm like, God, when we finally get done with this, selling this frickin' Syrah, and I was able to get out of the contract, I'm never making Syrah. I couldn't even taste Syrah for a few years, you know. Couldn't sell it through distribution because it was holding up the Cabernets. So I would just go and sell it to restaurants for by the glass. And, you know, oh my gosh, I think there's probably still a few bottles at Angel that I sold them back in 2004. That's how fast Syrah moves, you know, in the 2004 vintage. And so in any event, you know, I was really couldn't stand it. And then I'm still on the mailing list at Isley Vineyard, which was Arajo, and they make this Syrah that is just kick-ass. And I would get it and think, you know what, in the Napa Valley, Syrah is still possible. And it's not possible to make this wine, unfortunately, for less than $90 because it's crazy expensive. We get no tonnage off of that section. When Stephen Tebb wanted to leave it in, and then I saw how few tons we got versus the gallons, I just wanted to murder him. But then he, you know, months later out of barrel, he tasted me on this wine and said, "What do you think of this?" And I'm like, God, that's not the Zinfandel. What is this? It's really good. Do we have somebody else's wine? He's like, that's the Syrah. And so I became a fan. I know that Outpost has some up there. I know that the guys, you know, Mike Dunn has a little bit around. He has some Petite Syrah and some Syrah up there. But, you know, Cabernet, you know, the reason that Black Sears is pulling out all of that Zinfandel is because they get $80 for the Zin, $180 for the Cabernet. And it's the way of the world, man. Cabernet is king because you get more money for it. So you're right. We're one of the few, but this wine is absolute kick-ass. It's like Isley Vineyard. It's one of those wines that I just can't stop making because I love it so much.
That's a great comment because I call it the Cabernetization of the Napa Valley, which is because Cabernet is worth so much if you're selling grapes, and it's worth so much if you're making wine out of it. We're planting Cabernet in places where we shouldn't plant it. And that means we're farming not just a monoculture of grapes, we're farming a monoculture of a variety. And so to have the commitment to stick with these wines is really important, both from a diversity point of view in your portfolio of wines, but just from like, okay, let's accept that this is, maybe this would be great Cabernet ground, but it's exceptional Syrah.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I completely blame Jamie and Christian. Jamie's off the screen right now, but we are totally sold out almost of the 16 Syrah. So if you guys want any of this, you better, the Côte de Craig, you better speak up because we ended up having to pull this out of the library to do the damn tasting. So this is one that has, knock on wood, knock on the computer, has sold out for us very quickly because of the brute quality, the amazing quality of this wine. And I think anybody that's in the Napa office can attest when a bottle of 15, which is our first vintage, that's the year we bought this vineyard, when a bottle of 15 gets opened, oh my goodness, after 5 years, it is just, this wine always starts a little reticent and doesn't quite fully burst out, but my God, it is, I think this is going to be one of those wines that people open up 20 and 30 years from now and just blow people's minds with in the brown bag tasting. Like, what is this? And I think a lot of people will say it's French before California, maybe. Any comments on this? I got to tell my people out there that the Candlestick for us was, it was a labor of love buying that vineyard. You're talking about, my business partners. It cost me my 401k, my retirement, everything. We had a battle with, actually with a guy who's a friend now, David Senegal of the Costco, the heir of the Costco fortune. So when we went up there to get it, came down to us two, and the appraiser couldn't believe. He kept saying, "You're from Robert Craig," because he couldn't believe that we were the ones that ended up landing the vineyard. But it's because David's attorneys said, "Hey, there's a problem with this erosion control plan, the ECP," and I'm like, it's 99.9% sure this is good, and then we get the call from the county that we have to, replant everything to tear the vineyard out, replant the native vegetation, and then have a hearing in public hearing in a year to get approval for the vineyard. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go dive off the Golden Gate Bridge now that we purchased this thing. So there was an erosion control problem, and oh my God, I mean, fortunately, Jim Bushy of PPI Engineering knew somebody at the county. Hopefully there's nobody from the county of Napa on this thing. But we managed to get a track 1. We couldn't do track 2. We got a track 1 done where we had to do, all this repositioning of drains. It was just a project. But in the end, the Craig beat out Costco. We were able to obtain this vineyard. And so ever since then, for me, it's been a huge changing point in our fortunes. And then we, of course, bought the Mount Veeder Vineyard, and we bought the Affinity Vineyard from Bob and Lynn in the partnership. So now what we do is wholly, pretty much except for very few cases of wine, it's all ours, which is a great thing. And Candlestick is our Howell Mountain properties are our soul, Pete. So we give those to you to manage and expect greatness. And I'm just so happy to say that it's the best it's ever looked, except I want you to look into block 6 right in front of the lawn. That thing needs a haircut. But it really, really looks great. The set looks great. I mean, what do you think of the 19 vintage? To me, as I'm looking at the vines, it looks really, or the 20 vintage, it looks really good so far.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm generally a pessimist on crop size. I thought 18 was small, and obviously it wasn't. And I heard something from an old farmer years ago, which was small crops get smaller and big crops get bigger throughout the season. And so I think that the 20 crop is probably average plus, slightly above probably what we would normally see. But we're looking at our trend lines right now. We're about a week ahead of what we would consider normal. But at a place like Candlestick, that doesn't mean a whole lot because we still need to be sure we can get those grapes fully ripe. So if we're carrying a little more fruit, that may need some additional thinning. It's been a dry season, so we're really looking at irrigation practices and making sure that we're not overstressing stuff. Back to that tandem management question. And so the year presents challenges from a quality point of view, and making sure that we are staying on top of stuff to make those quality parameters happen.
Yeah, I mean, it was 99 degrees when I was in downtown Napa at our office, which is ordinarily cooler yesterday afternoon. Oh my God, I brought that wine over to you and I thought I was going to collapse just walking in and out of the car. I mean, it was hot, and that means it is very warm up around St. Helena, north in the valley, and Calistoga. It is really hot. The beauty of Howell Mountain is it's averages 10 to 12 degrees day, 10 to 12 degrees every day cooler than the average temperature on the valley floor below it. So you get, obviously everything's late, but the problem with everything being late is getting that maturity in the tannins, the lignification in the seeds and the skins, and that phenolic ripeness where you get that color component in the Cabernet, which, we had to leave everything really go in 15 and 17 in order to get those, the color that we wanted in the wine. But so far it looks pretty good. A lot of loose clusters, but the yield looks pretty good, and there's going to have to be some thinning, but for the love of God, Pete, don't thin too much.
It's like one of great wines.
I know you're going to make me want to, I know you're going to start getting after me to buy another well, but that's in time. That's in time.
It's, it's always hard for people to imagine that in most of our high-end vineyards, we drop a quarter to a third of the crop on the ground a month before harvest. And if people came out and saw what it looked like, they'd have a greater insight into, one, not just the farming costs, but the reduction in case volume, because that's what it takes to make wines like these.
It is what it takes, and we're so happy to have you on board. Do we have any more questions for Peter, for myself, Christian out there?
Well, we have a couple of questions actually. So Chris Seaton wanted to know, since the purchase of Candlestick, how the farming practices changed, and how will that impact us in the future? So that's one.
I think from our perspective, it's based on the way our business is structured, we really thrive on winemaker input. So we don't operate in a vacuum. We want Jason's input on everything we're doing out there. And so it's very much a marriage of making sure that we understand what his needs are in the winery. And, I had a question today from somebody said, "Oh, do you dry farm?" I said, "Depends on the spot. We dry farm some stuff and we irrigate some things." So it really is having a clear understanding with the winemaking team about what we're trying to achieve in the vineyard. And so maybe some stuff is going to get a little more water. Maybe some stuff's not going to get any water. But it really is those practices that we can do in the vineyard that are that feedback loop into the wine, and then sitting down and tasting the wines post-harvest, so we have some interaction on what those wines look like. That's the biggest thing we can do.
That's a great answer. Yeah, the bottom line is Pete is very humble, but his company is known as the best for a reason. We're spending the money in order to have the most data, the most attention put onto our blocks of the vineyard in order to produce a wine that, if you taste this versus his other clients that are 4 to 5 times the price even, that you will not be able to tell the difference out of the brown bag, because I believe our vineyard sites are some of the very best in the valley, bar none, and we have the best farmer. So it's, we're still providing value at $150, I believe, with what we're doing on this wine. It is, as Pete can tell you, it's not 10 grand an acre or 9 grand an acre to farm. It's 20 plus, and it's just the way it is if you want to do it right. So the change, Walsh tend to handle, as a company who planted the vineyard, it was one of my good friends that ran the high-end section of their company, and when he left, There is no longer a high-end section to the company. Great people, wonderful farming company, but just not our boutique spot is not what they do. And it is what Pete does.
And I'd echo that. You know, the guys at Walsh are great friends of mine. They were very helpful when I started my company 20 years ago. But, you know, they tend to, everybody fits into a niche, and we shy away from corporate accounts that are publicly traded because they live for the quarter. And we really want to focus on small, essentially family operation, or we want to know the owners in the operation because they're committed to the process. It's not uncommon for me to hear at least once a year from somebody coming to the valley who wants to start a project. And they say, we just like to be the next Harlan. And my response generally is, well, you don't have enough money, but you don't have enough time. And so they don't understand the process. And as you know, Elton, the time it takes to pull something like this off.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I can't believe we've been a brand this year. You know, Bob founded the winery in 1990. Our first vintage was 92. So in 2022, that'll be our 30-year anniversary, which we better start planning now. But it's amazing. We've been around for a long time. And Bob was, you know, early on the scene as a mountain vineyard developer from way back in his time at Hess Collection from the early 80s into 1990. So it's a journey. And I would just say to everybody, we're just coming to the end of our time, but is there anything else, Christian? Were there any other questions that we should hit?
Yeah, our boy Jason Guerrero out in KC wants to know, is there any style or type of wine that you think that we're missing from our portfolio, or is there anything on the horizon in that regard?
In terms of Robert Craig?
In terms of Robert Craig.
Well, Jason, I have just released a $50 wine for $110. We have a Syrah, we have a Rosé, we have a no mallow Chardonnay. You are going to have to go to another winery if you want anything else. We have one of the great Zins in the world. We've got a Merlot that kills. We make too many wines because I love variety as the spice. Bacchus loves variety, you know, and that is my personal God, is the God of wine. I think that, you know, we do a lot at Robert Craig, but everything we do is the same painstaking degree of detail. So in terms of your next exploration, you might have to go, you know, there's so many of our neighbors. I love Howell Mountain is my all-time favorite, but it's nice to see that pretty soon we're going to have another Veeder out and release too. What do you think, Pete? Does Craig need anything else? Do we need Chenin Blanc up there?
No Chenin Blanc, please. You know, my argument always is stick to what you do best, and the portfolio you have is wonderful. It always concerns me when we start adding in varietals or wines that aren't, one, that you don't farm, and two, that don't tell a story about the place.
Well, thank you very much. Pete, I tell you what, it is, for those of you guys that get to the Valley, if you ever have a chance to interact with him, Pete gives back to his company gives back to the community in a huge way. He gives back to his employees. He has a plan for his employees to own the company. And you know, that was one of the great things about talking to you. He's on the board of the only charity that we really give to, which is Clinic Olay, where most of the workers in the Napa Valley receive their health care. It's a tremendous spot. Pete's on the board there. So I really think, Pete, that you give back to your community. You're one of the great farmers and great guys in the Napa Valley. And I just so appreciate you being on board. So any final thoughts on the wines or the winery, or how great the CEO of Robert Craig is?
Well, you know, I'm very excited to be working on the project, Elton. You know, we farmed other stuff on Howell Mountain, and it's very much a pleasure to farm something as unique as Candlestick. And that's, quite frankly, we're at the point in our business careers where we're interested in unique and special, and that's what attracted to this project. It's unique and it's special. And that's really what we're interested in doing. So that's what gets us excited about this project.
My brother. Thank you so much, Pete, for joining us. I love it. I look forward to working with you guys. All your people are great. And for all of you out there, all of our Craigers, I just want to say happy Father's Day to the fathers. I think Toonces has written me such a loving letter. Our cat, I forgot to put his photo up. He's a little bit hacked off about that. But from Shelley and me to all of the Craigers that have come out to support us, we have a little surprise coming for all of you that have attended all 4 of these webinars. It's just really a wonderful look into the people that make this wine business go. And Pete, I can't thank you enough. So if you guys still want some of these wines, there's just a little bit of the 16 available. Not unfortunately any of the 19 rosé is all gone. We're drinking the last of it during the webinar, but call fast if you want some of the Cuvée or some of the 16 stick and Côte de Craig. They're gorgeous wines. So Pete, Christian, Craig crew, Craigers, love for the weekend. We're going to get through this freaking COVID and all of this unrest. I think we're going to come out of this a better country, a better society. And thank you for the support. You're keeping our little joint on the mountain in business. Cheers, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, everybody.